Ever wonder what a medieval city actually smelled like? Forget the romantic images of knights and castles for a moment. Picture this: you're walking down a narrow, dark alley in medieval London. The ground isn't paved with cobblestone, but with a thick, foul-smelling mud. And that's not just mud you're stepping in. Welcome to the stinking reality of the Middle Ages. While magnificent cathedrals reach for the heavens, the streets below were a far cry from heavenly. Imagine bustling crowds navigating streets that were essentially open sewers. Timber-framed houses jutted out over the narrow lanes, and with a cry of Gardyloo, a warning that came from the French phrase Gardyloo, meaning watch out for the water, a window would fly open. Suddenly, the contents of a chamber pot would rain down onto the street below. If you were lucky, you'd dodge it. If not, well, your day was ruined. These streets had a central channel, a gutter called a kennel, which was supposed to carry away rainwater. But in reality, it was a disgusting cocktail. It was filled with household waste, animal droppings from horses, pigs, and chickens that roamed freely, and the runoff from butcher shops and tanneries. On a hot day, the stench would have been overwhelming. On a rainy day, this foul mixture would flood, turning the entire street into a stinking swamp. People walked on wooden pattens, which were like overshoes on stilts, just to keep their feet out of the muck. So where did all this waste actually go? For most people, it was the chamber pot and the window. But if you were a bit wealthier, you might have a more sophisticated setup. Inside the house, you might find a privy, a small toilet closet. But this didn't connect to a sewer system as we know it. Instead, it would often empty into a cesspit dug in the basement or the backyard. This was essentially a stone-lined pit that collected all the household's waste. When it got full, and you can only imagine the smell, someone had to be hired to empty it. In castles and large manor houses, they had something called a garderobe. This sounds fancy, but it was just a toilet built into the thick castle wall. It was little more than a stone seat with a hole that opened directly to the outside. If the castle was surrounded by a moat, the waste dropped straight into the water. If not, it would just pile up at the base of the wall. Can you imagine the formidable aroma surrounding a majestic castle? It was a built-in defense system of a very different kind. Rivers were also a popular dumping ground. The River Thames in London and the Seine in Paris were effectively the main sewers for the entire city, carrying away tons of raw waste every single day. But this system had a major problem. What happens when the cesspits are full? Enter the heroes of the night, the unsung and very smelly professionals of the medieval city, the muckrakers, or as they were sometimes called, Gong Farmers. This was one of the most disgusting but essential jobs you could have. Working only at night, by the dim light of torches, these brave souls would climb down into the cesspits. They would shovel the accumulated waste, known as night soil, into buckets, haul it up, and load it onto a horse-drawn cart. It was incredibly dangerous work. The fumes from the decomposing waste could be toxic, and many muckrakers suffocated from the methane gas. It was also, as you can imagine, a job that made you a social outcast. People would hold their noses and cross the street to avoid you. But they were well paid for their troubles, earning a decent wage for a job no one else wanted. And what happened to all that night soil? It was carted out of the city walls and sold to farmers. It was a valuable fertilizer, rich in nitrogen, perfect for helping crops grow. So in a strange, circular way, the city's waste helped feed its people. It was the medieval world's first and perhaps most direct recycling program. Despite these efforts, the sheer amount of filth was a ticking time bomb. The connection between sanitation and health wasn't fully understood, but people knew that the bad air, or miasma, as they called it, was linked to sickness. The streets were a paradise for rats, which scurried through the piles of garbage, feasting on the endless supply of food. And where there are rats, there are fleas. In the mid-14th century, this deadly combination unleashed one of the worst pandemics in human history, the Black Death. Fleas carrying the Ixtleys, Yersinia pestis bacteria jumped from the rats to humans. In the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions of medieval cities, the disease spread like wildfire. Historical maps show how the plague followed major trade routes, but it was the dense, filthy urban centers where it truly exploded. While people at the time blamed everything from misaligned planets to divine punishment, we now know that the lack of basic hygiene was a major contributing factor. The great stink of the medieval city wasn't just unpleasant, it was lethal, helping to wipe out as much as half of Europe's population. The devastating impact of plagues like the Black Death slowly, very slowly, began to change things. People started to make the connection between filth and disease, even if they didn't understand the science behind it. City authorities began to pass laws against dumping waste in the streets and rivers. They organized more regular street cleaning and tried to regulate trades like butchery to keep the worst of the mess contained. This was the beginning of a long journey towards a cleaner future. It took centuries, but the lessons learned in the muck-filled alleys of the Middle Ages laid the groundwork for the modern sanitation systems we take for granted today. The development of enclosed sewers, clean water supplies, and regular waste collection all have their roots in the struggle to overcome the stench of the past. The next time you flush a toilet or see a garbage truck, take a moment to appreciate the centuries of effort it took to get here. We've come a long way from the days of Gardyloo. Thanks for joining us on this dive into some of history's dirtiest secrets. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. See you next time.